I was standing at the kitchen sink on a Tuesday morning in March when I found the first crack. That's the thing about the worst moments of your life. They don't come with sirens. They come with dish soap and a cup of coffee going cold on the counter. I had made my usual pot, Folgers, black, 2 sugars. I pour it into the same yellow mug I have used every morning for 26 years because Dale bought it at a truck stop in Georgia on our way to our honeymoon, and I have never had the heart to throw it away. I was washing a plate, the one my granddaughter had left from breakfast the day before, mac and cheese dried in the shape of a small continent. I was running water over it when I looked down at the counter and saw an envelope. It was a manila envelope, legal-sized, sitting right next to the sugar bowl like someone had left it there on purpose. Or maybe on purpose. Maybe that was the whole point. I picked it up and opened it with wet hands. The paper inside was damp and soft from the steam of the faucet. A printout, title transfer, the name of my house, the address I have lived in for 34 years, 1,200 Millbrook Drive. The sale price was $300,000. My hands went still. I mean, really still. Not the kind of still where you drop something and it falls. The kind of still where your whole body locks and your brain starts running, but your hands don't move, and the coffee in the mug goes cold, and the water keeps running over the plate, and mac and cheese floats off into the drain. I read the document twice, then 3 times. The sellers were listed as me. The buyers were listed as a man named Richard Kessler. The closing date was 6 weeks ago. 6 weeks ago, I was sitting right here in this kitchen feeding my husband soup because his back was bad and he could barely stand up straight. And I was telling my daughter on the phone that I was so proud of her and her new baby, and everything was fine. Everything was fine. And my house was already gone. I set the paper on the counter. I dried my hands. I picked up my coffee. It was cold. I drank it anyway. I needed something to hold. I needed something warm, even if it was dead warm, and it sat in my stomach like a stone. My name is Ellen. My friends call me Nell. I am 68 years old. I live in a town called Ridgewood, which is about 40 minutes outside of Columbus, Ohio. It is the kind of place where people leave their garage doors open, and the mailman knows your dog's name, and nobody locks their front doors on Saturdays because everyone is at church or the hardware store. I have lived in the same house since 1990. Dale and I bought it when our youngest started kindergarten, $240,000. We paid it off in 2008 when Dale got the early retirement package from the plant, and I used my mother's insurance money that she left us when she died. My mother left it to me specifically, not the kids, not Dale, me. She said I was the one who needed it. I don't know why she said that. Maybe she saw something coming. Dale and I were married for 42 years. We married in 1982 at a little white church outside of Dayton. His mother cried, and my father said the words for the first time that weren't angry. Dale was a good man. I need you to understand that. He was a good man who got tired.
He got tired of hurting, and he got tired of pretending he wasn't hurting. And somewhere along the way, the tiredness ate him up from the inside, and he let other people in. Not all at once, not with one grand betrayal, just little by little. A text here, a lunch there, a Tuesday afternoon that he couldn't explain. But that is not the story I am telling tonight. Tonight is about the people I built, the ones I carried, the ones I fed and drove and stayed up for and gave my whole life to, and what they did with it when they thought I wasn't watching. I have 2 children. David is 44. He is my son. He lives in Columbus with his wife Karen and their 2 boys. Then there is Rachel. She is 41. She lives in Dayton with her husband Mark and their daughter Lily, who is 3. Rachel is the baby, the one I carried to term after 2 losses before her, the one who was so small at birth that the doctor said she might not make it through the night. She made it. She made it, and she grew up, and she became the person I was most proud of, and she is the one who sold my house. I need to go back. I need to show you what it was like before, because if I don't show you the love, then the betrayal won't mean anything. It will just be a story about money, and it was never about money. It was about everything. When David was born, I was 24. Dale was 26. He worked at the Goodyear plant. I worked at a bank. We made $32,000 together, and we were happy. Not rich, not comfortable, but happy in the way that young people are happy when they don't know what is coming. We moved into a duplex on the east side of Ridgewood. 1 bedroom, a kitchen so small you could touch both walls if you stretched. Dale built a bookshelf out of milk crates, and we stacked our books on it, and that was our library. David slept in a bassinet next to our bed, and I would wake up at 3 in the morning to feed him, and Dale would roll over and put his hand on my back, and that was enough. That was everything. When Rachel came, I was 31. We had moved into the house on Millbrook Drive by then. 2-story, 4 bedrooms, a yard with a willow tree that Dale planted the day we moved in. He dug the hole himself even though his back was already bad, and I told him to let the movers do it, and he said no. He said, "This is my house, and I am going to put my hands in the dirt." Rachel was born on a Thursday. It was raining. The power went out in the delivery room, and the nurse lit a candle, and I remember the smell of that candle more than anything. Vanilla. That is what I remember. Vanilla and rain and Dale's face in the doorway, white and scared and crying in a way he would never cry again in front of me. I raised them alone most days. Dale worked 6 days a week. He was gone before they woke up, and he came home tired, and I was there with the house and the laundry and the school lunches and the broken bones and the fever at 2 a.m. I drove David to every baseball game, every single one, even when it was raining, even when I had a migraine, even when he struck out 4 times and came home angry and I had to be the one who held him. Rachel was different. Rachel was quiet. She would sit on the kitchen floor and draw for hours. Horses. She drew horses from the time she was 3 years old. She drew them on napkins and on the back of grocery lists and on the walls once when she was 5, and I had to repaint that whole room, but I didn't get mad.
I just gave her more paper. Those were the good years. I know people say that. I know people say the good years are always the ones that hurt the most later. But I am not saying that to be poetic. I am saying it because I need you to know what it felt like. I need you to know that I was happy. I was truly and completely happy. And I gave everything I had to those 2 kids. Everything. When David was 20, he got in a car accident, rolled his truck on I-70, broke his femur and 3 ribs. He was in the hospital for 3 weeks. Dale and I drove down from Ridgewood every day. The gas was almost more than we could afford. I slept in the waiting room chair with my purse as a pillow. Dale sat in the cafeteria drinking coffee and reading the newspaper and not talking because he didn't know what to say, and neither did I. When David came home, he couldn't work. He was on disability, so I took on extra shifts at the bank. I worked mornings and evenings. I made meals at 5 a.m. and ate them in the car on the way to my shift. I did that for 2 years until David got back on his feet. He never mentioned it. Not once. Not thank you. Not I know it was hard. He just moved on. Like it was nothing. Like I was nothing. Or maybe he thought he was saying thank you by getting better. I don't know. I have spent a long time trying to figure that out. Rachel was easier. Rachel called me every Sunday. Every single Sunday without fail. Even when she was busy. Even when Lily was screaming. She would call and we would talk for an hour, and she would tell me about her week. And I would tell her about Dale's back and the garden and the willow tree that was getting so big it was starting to lean over the fence. She loved that tree. She used to climb it when she was little. Dale built a little platform in it when she was 8, a wooden platform with a rope ladder. She would sit up there for hours reading books. She told me once that she felt safest in that tree, like nothing could reach her up there. I think about that sometimes now. The safest place was a tree her father built for her, and he built it with his bad back and his hands full of dirt from my yard. And now she sold that yard out from under me. I need to talk about the last few years before it happened, because there were signs, small ones. I ignored them, because I am a mother, and mothers ignore things. They have to. If you saw every crack in the foundation, you would never get out of bed. 3 years ago, Dale started acting different. He was forgetful. Not like normal old age forgetful. He would lose his keys and then find them in the fridge. He would call me by the wrong name. Not Rachel's name. Not his mother's name. The name of a woman I didn't know. He would say it and then stop and look at me like he was seeing me for the first time. I didn't say anything. I thought it was the medication. He was on new pills for his blood pressure. I thought maybe it was that. So I watched and I waited, and I made his dinner and filled his water glass, and pretended that the name didn't sit in my chest like a coal. Then about 2 years ago, Rachel moved her phone calls to evenings. She used to call on Sunday mornings, church time. Now she called at 7 or 8 at night. I would hear her talking in the hall, and she would lower her voice when she saw me. She thought I couldn't hear. I could hear everything. She was talking to Mark, her husband, and she was saying something about the house.
The house on Millbrook. She said the appraisal was good. She said we should talk about it. Mark said we should talk to Mom first, and Rachel said we can talk to her later. Then she laughed. Not a mean laugh, a tired laugh. The kind of laugh that means you have already made the decision and you are just waiting for the other people to catch up. I should have said something. I should have walked in there and said, "What are you talking about?" But I didn't, because I thought maybe it was about something else. Maybe she was talking about a friend's house. Maybe the appraisal was for a neighbor. I told myself stories. I am good at that.
I can build a whole world of explanations and live in it until the real world breaks through. A year later, Karen, David's wife, called me. She wanted to know if Dale was still planning to leave his truck at our house over Christmas. I said yes. She said okay. And then she said, David thinks we should talk about the property taxes. The property taxes. Like my house was something we needed to discuss. Like I was a line item on a spreadsheet. I said sure, let's talk about it. I said it with a smile. I kept my voice light. I said it because I didn't want to be difficult. I didn't want to be the mother who makes everything uncomfortable. So I said fine, let's talk. They never talked. They just kept talking around it. Little hints, little nudges. Rachel would text me pictures of the house. The kitchen, the willow tree, the back porch where Dale built that bench for me. She would say, look at this, Mom. Look how pretty it is. And I would say, yes, it is beautiful. And I meant it. I meant it every single time. Because I loved that house. I loved every board in it. I loved the water stain on the ceiling in the bathroom that looked like a map of somewhere I had never been. I loved the crack in the driveway that Dale filled with sand every spring. I loved it all. And they were measuring it. They were looking at it like it was a thing they were going to take. Then Dale got worse. His memory went. He couldn't remember how to use the microwave. He left the stove on, and I found the kitchen filled with smoke one night, and I almost called 911 because I thought something was burning. But it was just Dale standing in the living room confused. He was 59 years old, too young for this. I took him to the doctor, and the doctor said it might be early onset. Maybe Alzheimer's, maybe something else. He said we should start planning. And that word, planning, it sat in the room like a stranger. So I started planning too. I called a lawyer, a woman named Janet who had a small office on Main Street. Janet was nice. She had soft hands and she spoke slowly so Dale could follow. She told me about powers of attorney. She told me about trusts. She told me I should put everything in my name and make sure the kids couldn't access it without my consent. I said okay. I signed the papers. I gave Janet the authority. I thought I was being smart. I thought I was protecting myself. I didn't know that Rachel already had a lawyer too. That is how it went, month by month, quietly. Rachel got her hands on everything first. She was the one who took Dale to appointments. She was the one who talked to the bank. She was the one who signed papers because Dale couldn't remember what he was signing. And Rachel said it was okay. And I trusted her. I trusted her because she was my baby. The small one who climbed the willow tree. The one who drew horses on napkins.
The one who called me every Sunday for 20 years without missing a single week. When the envelope showed up on my kitchen counter that Tuesday morning, I didn't scream. I didn't call anyone. I put the paper down and I stood there for a long time. The water was still running. The plate was gone. The mac and cheese had washed down the drain. I looked at the empty plate and I thought about how that little continent had disappeared and how that was maybe a metaphor for something. But I didn't care about metaphors. I cared about the paper in my hand and the $300,000 and the fact that my house was gone and I had not been told. I called Rachel first. It was 7 a.m. She didn't answer. I called David. He didn't answer. I called Karen. Karen picked up on the second ring. She sounded sleepy. She said, "Yeah, Nell?" I said, "When did you sell my house?" There was a pause, a long pause. Then Karen said, "Nell, we thought we talked about this." I said, "We never talked about this." She said, "We talked about it." I said, "No, we didn't." She said, "Nell, please don't yell." And I wasn't yelling. I want you to know that. I wasn't yelling. My voice was flat. It was so flat, it was like a lake after the ice melts. Just flat and still, and underneath it was everything moving, but you couldn't see it. Rachel called me back 20 minutes later. She sounded calm. She always sounds calm. That is the thing about Rachel. She has been calm her whole life. Even as a baby, she was calm. Even when she was 3 and the doctor said she might not make it, she was calm. Her eyes were open and she was looking at the ceiling, and she was calm. And now she was calm on the phone, and she said, "Mom, I know this is upsetting, but Mark found a really good buyer, and the price was fair. And we thought since Dale can't manage the house anymore, and you're planning to move, it made sense." I said, "Who gave you the right?" She said, "Mom, we're your family. We were trying to help." I said, "Help me how? You sold my house. You sold the house I have lived in for 34 years. You sold it without telling me." She said, "We told you we were going to look at options." I said, "You did not tell me that. You told me the appraisal was good. You did not tell me you were selling my house." She went quiet. Then she said, "Mom, I know this is hard to hear, but Dale doesn't need that house anymore.
And you don't either. You can live with me. You can live with David. We have room. I hung up. I didn't say goodbye. I just hung up. And then I sat at the kitchen table in my robe with my cold coffee, and I stared at the wall for a long time. Dale was asleep upstairs. He sleeps a lot now, 12 hours sometimes. I went up and looked at him. He was lying on his back with his mouth open and his hand curled against his chest, like he was holding something. I stood there and looked at his face. The face I have known for 42 years. The face that used to look at me across the kitchen with that crooked smile when he came home from work, and I had dinner on the table. I wanted to wake him up and ask him, Did you know? Did you know they were going to sell the house? But I didn't, because I didn't know if I could handle the answer. I called Janet, my lawyer. She was shocked. She said, Ellen, the power of attorney you signed gives me authority over your finances. It does not give your children the right to sell your property. I said, I know that. She said, we need to act fast. I said, how fast? She said, yesterday.
So I went to Janet's office that afternoon. I drove myself. My hands were shaking on the wheel, but I drove. I parked in front of her building and I sat in the car for 10 minutes. Then I went in. Janet looked at the documents. She looked at them for a long time. Then she said something I have thought about every day since. She said, Ellen, the signature on the title transfer is Dale's. I said, what? She said, Dale signed the papers. He signed to sell the house. I said, Dale can't sign anything. He doesn't know what day it is. She said, I know, but the signature matches, and the notary stamp is valid. Someone brought him to the closing. Someone sat him down and guided his hand. She said it like it was a fact, like it was just something that happened, like the weather. And I sat there in her office with the beige walls and the framed law degree, and I felt the floor tilt. Dale signed it, my husband, the man who planted a willow tree for our daughter, the man who built a platform in that tree with his bad back and his dirt-covered hands. He signed the papers that sold our home. And Rachel was there. She was the one who brought him. She was the one who held the pen. I drove home. I drove slow. The roads were wet from the rain that had come through that morning. I passed the bank, the grocery store, the little coffee shop where I used to sit on Saturday mornings before the world got loud. I parked in the driveway, my driveway, the one with the crack that Dale filled with sand every spring. I got out of the car and I walked to the front door. I put my key in the lock and I opened it. The house was empty. Not cleaned out, not abandoned, just empty. Like someone had lifted everything out and left only the walls. The furniture was gone. The photos were gone. The bookshelf that Dale blew from milk crates was gone. The kitchen was bare. The counter where I had stood that morning was clean and cold, and there was nothing on it. I walked through every room. I touched the walls. I ran my hand over the doorframe where David measured his height every birthday. I stood in the hallway and listened. There was nothing. No hum of the refrigerator. No clock on the wall. No dog. No Dale. Nothing. I sat on the floor of the living room, right where the couch used to be. I sat there and I did not cry. I want to be clear about that. I did not cry. Not then. The crying came later. The crying came at 2 a.m. on a Wednesday when I was lying in a motel bed in Springfield with a bedspread the color of mustard, and I was looking at the ceiling and I thought about the willow tree, how tall it must be by now, how far it must lean over the fence, and I thought about Rachel climbing it when she was 8, sitting on that wooden platform with her books, feeling safe, and I thought about how safe I felt too, in that house, with my family around me, and how it was all gone, not because of some storm or fire, because the people I trusted most took it from me while I slept. The legal fight took 11 months. Janet was good. She filed a fraud claim. She argued that Dale lacked the capacity to sign, and that Rachel acted without my consent. The judge was fair. She ruled in my favor. The sale was reversed. But reversing a sale is not the same as giving it back. The buyer was a real estate investor. He had already flipped it. He had already sold it to someone else. So the court awarded me $300,000 in damages, plus attorney fees, plus emotional distress.
But the house was gone. The house where David took his first steps, where Rachel drew her horses, where Dale planted that willow tree. It was gone. Someone else lived there now. Someone else had their furniture in my living room. Someone else stood in my kitchen and made their coffee in my yellow mug. I will never know who that is. I tried to find out. I drove by once. There was a Subaru in the driveway and a trampoline in the backyard, and the willow tree was still there, still standing, still leaning. I parked across the street, and I watched it for 20 minutes, and then I drove away. Dale didn't remember any of it. Not the sale, not the documents, not Rachel. He remembered me. He knew my name. He knew I was his wife, but he couldn't remember the last 2 years, maybe 3. It was like someone had taken a pencil and erased everything from a certain line and left the rest. He would ask me where we were going, and I would say nowhere. We are home. And he would smile, that crooked smile, the one from the kitchen. And I would hold his hand and I would lie to him because the truth was too heavy and he was too light to carry it. Rachel came to see me twice after the court case. The first time she sat across from me at a Denny's in Dayton and she cried. She said, "Mom, I didn't mean to hurt you." I said, "I know." She said Mark found the buyer. She said Dale was confused and she thought it would be easier. Easier for who? I didn't say that. I just drank my coffee. She said she was sorry. She said she would make it up to me. She said I could see Lily whenever I wanted. I said, "I know." She left and I sat there for an hour after she was gone. The waitress came and asked if I wanted anything else, and I said no. I just wanted to sit there, in the noise, in the clatter of plates and the hiss of the coffee machine. I wanted to be around people, even if they didn't know me, even if they thought I was just an old woman eating eggs alone on a Tuesday. The second time she came, she was different. She was calm. She brought Lily. Lily was 4 by then, and she had her mother's eyes, dark and steady. She climbed into my lap and she put her hand on my face and she said, "Grandma, you have soft skin." And I broke. Not in front of her. I held it together until Rachel took Lily to the car. Then I sat in my apartment and I cried for 6 hours. I called it the 6-hour cry, because that is how long it lasted. 6 hours of shaking and heaving and making sounds I didn't know I could make. Janet called me the next day and said, "Are you okay?" I said no. She said, "Okay." And that was it. She didn't push. She just let me be not okay. David came once, just once. He stood in the parking lot of the apartment complex and he didn't come up. He called me from his car. He said, "Nell, I'm sorry." I said, "For what?" He said, "For all of it." I said, "Which one?" He didn't answer. He just said, "I love you." And I said, "I know." And he hung up. I never saw him again. Karen sent a Christmas card the next year. No return address. Just a photo of the boys opening presents. I put it on the fridge and I looked at it every morning for a month. And then I took it down and I folded it and I put it in a drawer. I don't know why I kept it. Maybe because it was proof that they existed, that they were real, that they were my children, even when they weren't mine anymore. Dale died 14 months after the house. He died on a Sunday morning in his sleep. I was holding his hand. He was warm. He was so warm. I kept holding it, even after. Even when it went cold. I held it because I didn't know what else to do with my hands. The hospice nurse came in and she was very gentle. She took the hand from mine and she closed his eyes and she said, "It's over." And I said, "I know." And she looked at me like she didn't believe me, like she thought I should be screaming. But I was done screaming. The screaming had happened. It had happened in the motel in Springfield and in the Denny's parking lot and in my apartment at 2 a.m. It had all happened. This was just the last quiet thing. I am alone now. I live in a 1-bedroom apartment in Springfield. It is clean. It has new carpet and a window that faces a parking lot. I have my yellow mug. I have the couch that Dale's mother gave us. I have the bookshelf that I rebuilt from milk crates because Dale's memory was fading and he didn't remember what they were for, but I did. I have the photos. The real ones. The ones they didn't take. I look at them sometimes. David at 6. Rachel at 3. Dale at 26 with his crooked smile. The willow tree. Small and thin and leaning the wrong way. I go to the coffee shop on Saturday mornings. The same one I used to go to before everything. The barista knows my name. She doesn't ask questions. She just pours my coffee and sets it down and says, "Have a good morning." And I say thank you. And that is the whole conversation. That is enough. Some days it is enough. Some days I sit there for 2 hours. Because the apartment is too quiet. And the parking lot is too loud. And the middle is a place I don't want to be. I sit in that coffee shop and I watch the people come and go, and I think about how easy it is to walk through someone's life and take everything and leave them sitting in a booth with a cold cup of coffee and nowhere to go. Rachel still calls. Not every week anymore. Maybe every other week. She talks about Lily. She talks about Mark's promotion. She never talks about the house. She never talks about the money. She never talks about the 11 months. She just talks about Lily and the weather and what she watched on TV. And I listen. Because she is my daughter. Because she climbed that tree. Because she drew those horses. Because I carried her for 9 months and I held her in a hospital with no power and a candle burning vanilla and a doctor saying she might not make it, and she made it. And I loved her. And I still love her. I don't know how to stop. Some days I drive past the old house. I don't go in. I just drive past. The Subaru is gone. There is a minivan now. A woman hangs laundry in the backyard. The willow tree is taller. It must be 15 feet now. Maybe more. It leans over the fence the way Dale knew it would. He knew when he planted it. He knew it would grow toward the light. That is what trees do. They grow toward the light, even when you don't want them to. I am sitting in my apartment right now. It is late. The parking light hums through the window. My coffee is cold. I am thinking about the yellow mug, the truck stop in Georgia, the honeymoon we never took because Dale's mother got sick, the bookshelf made of milk crates, the platform in the willow tree, the name he said one morning that wasn't mine, the envelope on the counter, the bare walls, the empty rooms, the 6-hour cry, the hospice nurse saying it's over. I am not okay. I want to be clear about that. I am not okay, and I may never be okay. But I am here.
I am in this ament with my cold coffee and my milk crate bookshelf and my photos and my yellow mug. And tomorrow I will make coffee, and I will sit in the coffee shop, and I will watch the people come and go, and I will go home to the quiet, and I will do it again the next day. Because that is what is left. That is what I have. And some days it is enough. Some days it is everything. The willow tree is still standing. I can feel it leaning. I can feel it growing toward the light.